Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Today is the first in a series of webinars we're going to be doing on G Suite Enterprise for Education. Today's topic is assigning G Suite Enterprise for Education licenses in your admin console, how to make sure you have them, how to make sure they're set up properly and ready to go, and assigned to your staff and students that you need to assign them to. You can see here on the screen, we've got a short URL for you for the slide deck. If you want to follow along or refer back to the slide deck later, we've got that for you. It's ampd.it/assigning-licenses. And I believe that's present on the YouTube page and a lot of other places for you to be able to see that. So we'll get rolling here. Thanks for making it today. My name's Tom Woods from Amplified IT. I'm our Google for Education training lead here at Amplified IT. I've been in the IT business for almost 30 years and here at Amplified IT for almost 6. So a little bit of background. If you're not familiar with us with Amplified IT, we're a premier partner of Google's, teaming up with Google for these sessions on Enterprise for Education. Amplified IT is a technical consultancy company. We're based out of Norfolk, Virginia. And we work with schools and school districts and in K-12 and higher ed institutions around North America on their educational best practice use of G Suite for Education, the admin console, and everything in between. So that's what we do. We've worked with almost 5,000 different school districts, schools, and institutions across North America. And we'd love to work with you and help you navigate and make sure you have great success in your Google for Education usage. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to cover these topics. We're going to look at, first of all, the various types of licenses that you can have with Enterprise for Education. Then we'll take a look at how to find those licenses. Where do you see them in the console? How do you make sure that they're there properly before you get rolling? Then the most important part, how do we apply those licenses? And that's been a little bit tricky for some folks out there. If you already have Enterprise for Education, making sure that those licenses are properly applied so that as free COVID-introduced features start to end in a day or two, your users won't be without those features and those things will continue. We'll finish that off with a couple other alternate methods of applying licenses that might be of interest to you. And then we'll make sure we keep 5 or 10 minutes at the end for a little bit of Q&A at the end as well. We have slide decks links here up at the top of most of these slides, as well as a link to the website for these sessions. If you want to hit that website and see what other sessions are available in this series, or you haven't signed up for any of the other ones yet, then you can do that through that link. And Devin Regis from Google is on with us. She's monitoring the chat, so please make sure you ask your questions there in the chat on your screen, and Devin will be keeping an eye on those, and then she'll bring some of those questions forth in the Q&A piece at the end of the session. And we just wanted to remind everyone on that website, you can access the recording after today. So if you didn't quite catch us live today, you can access the recording through the website for all these sessions. There'll also be links to this slide deck and all the other slide decks that will be used during these sessions there under the recording and resources tab that's being indicated there on the arrow. Bottom left, we have a link to that page. That's the page that probably got you here today for your registration. But if you wanted to register for any of the other sessions that are happening, then for sure go back to that page after we're done the session here, and you can register for any of the other ones as well. All right, so let's get into it. What are the types of licenses? So just to make sure there isn't any confusion with what's available to you, when you're purchasing Enterprise for Education licenses, there are technically 2 different types. There's what you might call the normal license, or what would be our faculty and staff license. And having that license assigned to a user is going to give them all the things that you see on the Enterprise for Education page of listed features like Meet recording, live streams, unlimited originality report scans, cloud search, things like that. We've got a few things listed here, but that's not necessarily everything. Then there is also, in some circumstances, depending on how you're purchasing this, a student license that you can apply to your students in your G Suite domain. Student license gives your students a few things like cloud search, being able to sign into Windows 10 workstations, and affords you as the admin in the admin console some other administrative controls over those users. And just to make clear of note at the bottom there, both the faculty staff licenses and the student licenses both allow you to use the entirety of the Security Center suite of features that are in the admin console, regardless of how you're buying licenses and how many you're buying. The Security Center will be available to you. We got a great link over here on the left. If you want to just go to the Google page, where there's a nice side-by-side of G Suite for Education compared to G Suite Enterprise for Education, and where the extra features for Enterprise come in a nice side-by-side layout. You can check that out on that link there. So when it comes to then purchasing Enterprise, you have two options here. You can purchase a full domain license, and that's based off of your full-time employee numbers on the NCES website. That's the numbers that Google and a reseller like ourselves are going to use to figure out what that FTE count is. And you're purchasing that number of licenses if you want a full domain. When you purchase that full domain model, that's when you get those student licenses, and those are free in a 1-to-10 ratio. So if you have 100 FTE staff, then you're going to get 1,000 student licenses for free to be able to apply to your students as well. Outside of that full domain model, your other option is to buy a certain amount or a handful of licenses. So maybe you're buying a few hundred or a certain number just to cover some key staff or key people that you want to purchase those for. That's a partial domain license, as we call it. You wouldn't probably be buying those to apply to students. In that situation, I'm sure it's going to be faculty and staff. And those are purchased in whatever quantity you're looking for. There is a minimum of 50 or 15% of that staff FTE number from NCES, from their database. Whatever is the larger one, which in most cases is the 15% of your staff FTE. But if you're super small, it might be the 50 has the largest number, and that's the minimum that you need to purchase. In that scenario, when you're doing the partial domain, you're just buying those faculty, staff, full-featured licenses, and there's no free students licenses afforded to assign to your students. So you're just purchasing those stock licenses only for your faculty and staff in that situation. All right, so let's take a look at how we find our licenses. And the easiest and the first place you want to look, so if you're an existing Enterprise for Education customer or school, you just purchased this recently, a few weeks ago or a month ago, you want to make sure that those licenses are there and they're ready for you to use. And if you haven't checked that, that's a really good place to start. And we start by checking the billing section of the admin console. So let's jump over to our admin console here. We're going to jump in to the billing section, and I'll show you right here what this looks like. This is a demonstration domain, so it doesn't have a lot going on in it, but we've got some Enterprise for Education licenses here, as we can see. So we've got Enterprise for Education. Those would be our faculty and staff licenses. We've got in this practice domain 31 available. We can see here that 19 have been assigned. So this is, again, a really great place to check quickly to kind of see how many out of your pool of licenses you've maybe assigned to people. Whether you did full domain or whether you bought just a handful of licenses, the counts will be here, and you can see which ones, how many you've assigned. Below that, if we purchased in that full domain model where we received the 1-to-10 ratio free student licenses, then we'll see a second line item here for student licenses with bracket student there listed there. And it's important to recognize that. When we go to apply licenses, it's easy to possibly pick the wrong one or not realize there's a couple options there. And we have seen some schools or districts pick the wrong license, and then we have to go through a bit of work to undo that. So being aware of those two licenses, if you're in full domain, you should see student licenses. Now, you'll have a larger number than me in that 1-to-10 ratio, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands or tens of thousands of free student licenses, and those are listed there as well. So that's where you can check that. If you know that you've purchased Enterprise and you don't see what you think you should see here, I think you should then speak to the reseller through whom you purchased it from, get them to take a look at that for you. They can speak with Google if something didn't happen or something wasn't processed correctly. We want to make sure the right numbers and the right counts are there before you find out too late, when you really need those licenses assigned, and then you're going to have a problem. So making sure they're there is important. Okay, so we'll take a bit of time here to go through how to apply your licenses. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Some may fit better given your situation than others. So it'll be really up to you to decide maybe what the best application model is for you and what's going to work best due to your size and your complexity of where your users are in your OU structure, what your OU structure is like, and things like that are really going to feed into that conversation. So let's take a look, and then we'll go through all these and we'll find them in the console and walk you through them. There are mainly these four major options here. We can assign licenses on a single user basis, apply them to one person, one user at a time. We can apply licenses to multiple users at a time, up to 50 at a time, given the way the GUI and the user module interface in the admin console works. So that allows us to do it a little bit more in bulk, up to 50 on a page at a time, and we'll see that in a second here. We can do the CSV upload and download, or download and upload. That's utilizing what's normally the bulk upload feature to create users. We can actually use that just to update and append information to those users, including applying a license. That, of course, now opens the door, because it's a CSV, to hundreds and hundreds of users at a time, which could be really efficient and save you a lot of time. Another option that's provided, and we'll take a look at that, is auto assigning by organizational unit, or OU. So let's jump back over and we'll take a look at these. First of all, we'll just take a look at a single user. So we could go over here to the user management module, pick any particular user that we want to see. Now, first step, we could just check off that user, or maybe a handful, 2 or 3 or a half dozen. Doesn't really matter, using the check boxes. We can go up here to the More option box and select Assign Licenses. This is going to pop up, and this is where I mentioned paying attention to the naming on those licenses so that we don't select the incorrect one. We have Enterprise for Education here, but if we hit the drop down, we do see that we can also access the student license. Now, yours are not going to say trial beside them like mine does in this test domain, but you will see student in brackets. So if this was potentially a student, I would want to make sure that I apply the appropriate one. If we were to mistakenly apply this license to a student, now you might really be in a tricky spot, because think about all the features those students are going to get, like Meet recording, possibly live streaming, depending on your Meet settings, things like that you do not want them to mistakenly get access to. So be very diligent and careful with how you apply these. So selecting the license and assigning that is going to do that for us, just like that. And then we're done. Alternatively, we could look for a user first, and we'll just do that real quickly here. Find a particular user through the search box at the top. And when we drill straight into the user page and we're looking at all the user card details here, one of the cards on the page is licenses, as you can imagine. And we can come in here and edit the licensing box. And again, be careful of the drop down, selecting the appropriate license as needed, and then just sliding the slider over to assign it, and saving it is going to assign it there on a person-by-person basis. Okay, so let's go back. We're going to go back to the main user page. And under the main user page, we mentioned up to 50 at a time. So you could use your filters or traverse to particular OUs and get a list of users, and then we could select all. And when we select all on that page, you can see here, we can have up to 50 at a time. Then through the More option, we can assign or remove, but in this case, assign, and we could do 50 at a time. Or with a creative filter on all users in the domain, we could narrow down on a particular, maybe by attribute like department or something else that could help us get that list of users on the screen, and then select them all at once and apply it. So again, just going up to 50 in that way could be super helpful for you. Third option was the CSV downloading and bulk updating. And the reason why we mentioned the downloading is you kind of have to start somewhere. So there's a great option here to download users. And I would suggest downloading just all user columns. You're going to get everything that you need into, let's say, Google Sheets, if that works for you. If you want to do a CSV and you've got a local application like Excel, then you could edit it that way. You hit download, and it's going to generate, in this case, a report of all users in this domain, every single one of them. That's going to take just a few seconds here to complete in my situation, because my numbers are pretty small. Then we can open that in Google Sheets just to show you that real quick. And in Google Sheets, we have a column here to the right for new licenses. And there are SKU numbers, one for staff faculty, one for free student licenses, basically pasting in that appropriate SKU number here, getting that all set. And coming back here, I think I just closed my admin console. Let me open that again. Coming back into the admin console, you would then bulk update, provide that CSV. So if you're in Google Sheets, you're going to have to download as CSV, or in an Excel, export or save as CSV. You then provide that CSV file here. And basically, because those users already exist, it's just going to look for new columns of information. It's going to update or append to them, and it will apply that license. This will not remove a license, but it will apply that new license SKU number to those users. So with that CSV, I know you can do at least 400 or 500 at a time for sure. And that's a really great way to do large numbers if you've got thousands of students to do and things like that. That's a great option. Before we leave this screen, I would also just want to mention here that we can edit the columns on the screen display here. And one of the columns is license. And we can add this, maybe move it up and save that. And then it's a really great, quick way as you traverse through your OU structure to get a quick view of who has Enterprise for Education licenses, because you're going to see them listed right there on the screen as you look at users. And hovering my mouse over isn't helping with that situation, but there you go, you've got it. Fourth option on that list was auto assign by OU. So this one's a little tricky. It's under the billing section where we are looking at the numbers. So we're going to go back to billing, and we'd either click on staff and faculty full license or the student license. So we're just going to click on the full license here. Let that page open. And we would then, again, click on Enterprise for Education, the full license here, and we get this auto licensing option. This auto licensing right here is everyone in the whole domain. So you will not, in any educational situation, be using that most likely, but we can say override for specific OUs over here. And then we could go pick a particular OU that we want, override that OU, say done. Save this. And what that's going to do is all current users in that organizational unit will get this full staff license. And perpetually going forward, any new users, either new to the domain or just newly introduced into that OU or moved into that OU, would get a license assigned to them. So that sounds slick, and in right circumstances, it can work fairly well, but understand that this is everyone in the OU. There could be suspended accounts. It's going to apply a license to those suspended accounts. If you move someone out of the OU, it is not going to remove the license from them when they fall out of the scope of that OU. So it's been a bit tricky or problematic for schools in many cases. In our experience working with the schools and districts that we've worked with, they go for some of the other options like CSV or some of the other things we're going to look at, because they've just got too many suspended users, or their OU structure isn't really going to narrow down and target the people that they really want to target. So just be careful with that one. Make sure it's going to do what you want before you engage with that particular feature. All right, we're going to go back here and just look at a couple more alternate methods. They're definitely worth mentioning. And for the folks out there that are a little more savvy, these could be right up your alley. So Google Cloud Directory Sync, which is the free tool from Google that we use to synchronize our G Suite directory with Active Directory or another LDAP. So creating users into G Suite, creating groups. A lot of you may use this tool already. It has options for applying these licenses. So as it's doing its syncing and the search rules that you configure there with the right amount of work, and we can help you with that. We've done this with a lot of schools. You can configure this to fairly intelligently apply licenses to users in G Suite. And after you create users, it can interpret that and move licenses around and do what you need it to do. I see some questions here. I'll finish up this slide, and then we're pretty much at questions anyway. Google Apps Manager, or GAM, is kind of the Swiss Army knife of G Suite administrators. It's scripting things from a command line. This also can apply licenses, and you could feed GAM a CSV file, obviously set up with the right people, the exact people you want, and then apply those SKU numbers, those license code numbers, using GAM commands. And a lot of districts have created some GAM scripts that run on a daily basis and things like that to make sure any new students or any new staff put into certain areas get licenses applied. So that's something you could definitely configure and do as well. Let me just check these questions here. From Chris in the audience, if you apply a student license and then the student leaves our district, do we recoup that license automatically when the account gets deleted? Chris, the answer would be yes. If it is deleted, then that license would go back into the available pool. If the account is just suspended, it still retains a license, just like that auto OU assignment we mentioned. If you go in tomorrow and suspend a student or suspend a staff or teacher account, it still has that license. You would have to intentionally go remove that license from that user. It would go back into the available pool and then, assign a license to someone else. But if you do delete, you will get that back in the pool. It is not burnt or gone in any sort of way. Noel is asking, what happens when you apply a license and a person leaves and you suspend them? Oh, almost the same question, Noel. Suspending, they will still retain that license. It'd be up to you if you want to move it off of a suspended account to get it back to use for a live-bodied person. Mike's asking, what is the benefit of a student having a license versus just their teacher? That's a great question, Mike. Maybe let me just advance the slides here to our Q&A, and I'll answer that. Again, a reminder that the recording and this slide deck is going to be accessible on the registration page for this series, so you can definitely hop back there. I also mentioned before we dive into more questions here, we are a premier partner and reseller with Google of Enterprise for Education. You can definitely, if you don't have it yet, speak to us on that. We offer a lot of great value add with purchasing Enterprise for Education through us, from dedicating onboarded team. We have office hours, regular training sessions for you, advanced support through our technical support team. We can also offer you Google Voice licensing, which a lot of schools have found helpful, especially with remote learning as well. So all those things are definitely some of the benefits of speaking to us about your Enterprise for Education purchase. So let me go back to Mike's question. The student license has a few things, and it is a free license, so it's not got a long list of features. Cloud search would be one of them. Signing into Windows 10 workstations, I think, was mentioned on the slide. The other things I like to go back to are going to be more admin-initiated features in the console, but if you wanted to use Gmail sandboxing on students, where their attachments are taken to a virtual environment and executed to see if they're malicious before the mail is even delivered to them, they would need the license, the student license for that. Another real popular one is context-aware access, where by geographic location, like in the US, or by IP subnet, like in our schools or not within our schools and network, you can allow or disallow access to services like chat, Meet, Gmail, Drive, Calendar, what have you. Students would need that free student license if you want to do context-aware access. That'd be a couple big ones I can think of. Jim's got a question about GCDS. Is the remove license checkbox specific to the license type, students versus staff, so I can apply and remove licenses with two separate rules? Jim, I believe so. I'm not our expert in GCDS. Our support team definitely know that inside and out. I do know there is that checkbox to remove, and that's why the GCDS sync tool is a really intelligent choice, and it's got a little bit more smarts built in. Whatever current license, staff or student, is applied to that user, that's what it would be removing when they fall out of scope. So I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, but I may not be able to take it any further than that for you. Let us know if you have some questions. You can always contact us. Sky says we purchase full staff licenses, but I don't see the free student licenses. Number one, Sky, if you did not purchase the full domain package, and taking into account that full staff FTE number in North America from the US from the NCES database, that's when you get the free 1-to-10 ratio student licenses. If you just bought 50 or 75 or 150 just ad hoc licenses, those are just the staff license, and that's it. And that's all you have to apply to your staff. You wouldn't get student licenses in that situation. So maybe that's the answer to your question. Craig, I don't have the GAM commands, and I'm not our GAM person close at hand to point you to them, but perhaps Devin or I can help with that after the session's over and maybe make that available to you. Suzanne's asking, if the user gets moved to an assigned OU that doesn't have rights to a license, will the assigned license be removed? The answer is no, and that's why the auto assign by OU is a little bit problematic in that today I'm in the OU where that's set. So I wake up this morning after being dropped in there and I have an enterprise license. If you now move me tomorrow to the grade 6 OU because I'm suddenly picked up a teaching job there, and that OU does not have auto license assignment, it's not going to take the license away from me. Nothing in the console automatically takes a license away. GCDS, as we said, your own GAM scripts or your own acts of administration in the console to physically choose to remove a license from someone is how that's going to work. All right, and I'm not sure, Devin, if there's any more questions. There's another one from Brian. We got a few minutes left here. Brian says, can you assign the auto-assign OU to multiple OUs? Brian, that's a great question that I neglected to really show well. Let's jump back in here and let's pick a few OUs. So we'll pick this campus and we'll actually save this. I think I didn't commit the save before. So we've got staff and then one campus or campus one, and that's already saved. Now we go back to this override for specific OUs button, and we go again and we pick campus 2. And we override that to turn this on, hit save. And you can see that all happening. And you just end up with this list of either different OUs for the staff license, or the same thing would happen down here under student if you did it. You do have the option, even within here, even though we're under the staff license, we could flip this from this point to the student license, which feels a little weird given where it lives, but it all kind of goes back to just the same SKU number that it's applying as an attribute to those users. We also could, on a given day, stop doing this and say off, maybe to answer some of the other questions like from Suzanne. That doesn't suddenly pull the license away from everyone in the Campus 1 OU. That just stops new users from having a license applied that would be dropped into that OU, but is not going to pull a license away. Yeah, so I think there's also been some questions on purchasing for Devin there in the chat. There's been some extension of the promotional pricing till the end of October. I think what we should do is just recommend that you get in touch with your reseller that you've already been speaking with about Enterprise for Education, or get in touch with us here at Amplified IT, and we can get you all the details on how the pricing works depending on those different ways that you purchase it, and what you need to do in order to get that done before the end of October. And also the COVID features that were given to everyone by Google back, in the spring, are due to expire tomorrow, I guess at the end of the day tomorrow, September 30th. So a lot of those features that your teachers may be using are going to disappear. The only thing that's been extended or changed a little bit is there's going to be a temporary Meet recording extended out into the rest of this year. But everything else, live streaming, Meets up to 250 people, a lot of those other features are going to go away as of the end of the day tomorrow. So speaking with your partner or your reseller like us is going to be the way to go. A couple more questions here from Dave. Is there a way of reporting on all users that have a license, irrespective of OU or status? Dave, I think the best way to do that, great question, was here in the users module where we were before. And the console's upset that I'm not paying it enough attention. And we're back. Best thing to do would be to download your entire user report from the top here, include all columns like I mentioned, and then as we had on the screen, I won't bother bringing it up again, there's 30 plus columns of information. One of those columns is their current license. Okay, so that's going to be there in the spreadsheet. Maybe if I whip open one of these real quick here, and we go over to the end, you can see under license read only is if they have a current license. This is the SKU number for the staff license. That's my indicator that they have a license applied. I'd also see the 0003 for the student license if someone had a student license applied. And then what we pointed out earlier was the new license column is where you would put something like that, upload the CSV to apply a new license. But this is where you could see it. If you're able to, you could also use a GAM command to grab that read-only license attribute and do your own report through Google Apps Manager as well. A couple more questions here, and then we'll finish up here on time. When overriding and from Noel, when overriding and adding licenses to an OU, does it automatically pick up the sub-OUs under that OU and apply licenses to them? Oh, Noel, now you're testing my brain. I believe, and my team probably knows, and I can definitely check with them afterwards, I think it's just the users in the root of that selected OU, and you would have to subsequently pick OUs below that. But I'm not sure. It may flow all the way down. Unless Devin knows the answer to that question, she can put it in the chat for me and I'll relay it. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, Devin doesn't quite know either. I know people on our team have been dealing with this and they would know the answer to that. So my apologies. Okay, and I think that's it for time. We're going to end here on time. Thanks for all the questions. If you have more questions that we didn't really cover today or get to today, I would really encourage you to register for one of the other sessions that we're doing with Google. They've got different topics, different pieces of enterprise for education, but we'll take and see any of the questions that we can get from you during any of those sessions. So even if it's a licensing question and you want to bring that in when we get to the Q&A on another session, we'll definitely try to answer that for you. So that's what we'd recommend you do. Go back to that website, register for the other sessions we're doing. We'd love to see you there. Thanks for being here for this one. We hope that was super helpful and helped clarify maybe some of the confusion. Now that you have this product, you want to make sure you get these licenses applied before features disappear on your teachers and staff, so there's no disruption in that service for them. So again, I'm Tom Woods from Amplified IT, and thanks to Devin Regis from Google as well. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.